Welcome back, podcast friends. In today's episode, this is actually an episode that I probably would have been very afraid to give back before the quote unquote pandemic. But I think since the quote unquote pandemic has come out and over and people are more aware of things, I think everybody's more aware, realizing how we've been hoodwinked in so many different ways, how they make us look at one thing when really it's something else. And the whole thing is they don't really care about our health. They just care about the profits, these big companies. So that's what this is going to do. I'm not going to go depth in any of these topics. There's about three main topics I'm going to go over with today, just to give you examples of what's going on and how it's actually killing us, movements that these big corporations are making so they can make more money. And before I get started, I just want to briefly remind you that if there's anybody out there who does have type 2 diabetes, has high blood pressure, has cholesterol issues, anything like that, and you would like some help from us, one, we have a newsletter that comes out every week. It's a free newsletter. But the other is we've come up with 3 digital courses. You can get a basic course that only has about 15 of these videos, or you can get the major course that has 50 of these, or you can get even the bigger course, the elite course, where you actually get us one-on-one talking with you for 8 separate hours through a 2-month period to answer any questions you have. The first thing I want to talk to you about, and this is called Medicine or Marketing, Untangling the Deception, which is very crazy how hard this is. The things that I'm going to tell you have been so common sense, and we've known for years, for decades, but now things are getting cluttered, things are getting messy, and they're making people think the wrong things because they want to get this money. The 2 biggest lies, or 2 of the huge lies that have totally ruined our health and made billions, trillions of dollars for the food companies and drug companies. The 2 biggest lies, one was the food pyramid. Everybody thinks they eat healthy because they eat by the food pyramid. You have to realize the food pyramid came up. This was invented by the sugar industry to give to the big food industry to help tell people that there's nothing wrong with eating sugar. There's nothing wrong with eating carbohydrates. In fact, the most nutrients you should eat should be carbohydrates. And that's what the whole food pyramid is based on, because that's what food companies, food is based on. It's ultra processed carbohydrates, and it's high fructose corn syrup and sugar, and it's vegetable and seed oils. Everything they make is chemical based and ultra processed carbohydrate based. Both of those things, ultra processed carbs and chemicals, are killing our bodies. And I'm going to go through this just a little bit, but remember, any chemicals, and we have chemicals all around us, these are foreign to our bodies. And that's how our body works. Our body is made where we give it the nutrients and it can grow, heal, thrive, and survive just fine. When we keep bombarding it with all this glucose and keep bombarding it with all these chemicals, our body doesn't know what to do with it. So it's working its hardest trying to figure out what to do with it, where all you have to do is quit eating it. That is the key. That's the key to type 2 diabetes. That's key to high blood pressure. That's key to everything. Quit eating ultra processed carbs and chemicals, and even some God-made carbs. It just depends. The food pyramid was one of the biggest lies, because once they got everybody eating according to the food pyramid, remember, our bodies, and in every single podcast I do, I think about this. Anytime I hear this new fad diet or anything that people are coming up with just to try to make money, because they don't really care about your health. A lot of times they just want to make money. But anytime I hear about a new fad diet, all I do is think, okay, what does the body need? I have 2 different degrees. My first degree was a biology major, chemistry minor with pre-med. Then I worked a year on my master's, and then I got another degree for 6 more years where I got my doctor of pharmacy and then did a residency. I do know how the body works. I do know what the body needs. What the body needs is it needs protein, which is amino acids. That's the basic building block. It needs fat, and the basic building block is fatty acids. It needs vitamins, minerals, and water. Those 5 things are the 5 things that you must put in your mouth so you can put it in your body so your body can grow, heal, thrive, and survive. It can fight off bacteria. It can fight off viruses. It can fight off cancer. It can fight off all kinds of things if you give your body the nutrients that it needs. But the nutrients we don't need are carbohydrates. The basic building block is glucose, and an abundance of toxicity of glucose is why we are seeing all the diseases that we see now. So people are sitting here eating things like bread, pasta, desserts, cookies, crackers, rice, fast food. They're eating all these things, and they think that they're eating according to the food pyramid, which they are, and they think that's healthy, which it is not. Now everybody's wondering why everybody's obese, everybody has diabetes, everybody has hypertension, everybody's having heart attacks. And the answer is known, but it's so hard to get the information out to you guys because we're being hoodwinked by these food companies and drug companies that tell you that what they're doing is healthy. And you just need to keep on doing what you're doing. Just decrease the amount of toxins you eat and exercise more, which has nothing to do with fat loss, hardly at all. That's a whole nother topic. So now what they do, that's one, the food pyramid. Okay, that's one lie that's killing everybody. The other one is telling you that eating fat is what makes you fat. Okay, again, these are lies. This has been proven over and over again. It is not eating fat that makes you fat. I've done so many podcasts over this. It is overwhelming your body with toxic levels of glucose that's causing us to become obese and causing us to be sick. Then we get hoodwinked even farther. So that's what I'm going to go into. Oh, and the other lie that people are coming up with now, and it makes me really irritated, is all these people that have your positive self-image. Oh, it shouldn't matter if you're obese. It shouldn't matter if you weigh 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 100, 200 pounds over what you should weigh. You should love yourself no matter what. Listen, that is also rhetoric coming out of people who are trying to continue to give you the food that you're eating that made you obese in the first place, and the food companies that want to give you all this, or the drug companies that want to give you all this medicine to take care of all the diseases because you eat that way. Being obese is not a matter of looks. That's in your own mind. That's whatever your mind wants to think about that. Being obese is very unhealthy. It is what leads to all the organ damage that we get. It leads to death. It leads to hospitalizations, medications, doctor bills. Obesity is a state of health, not a state of looks. That's totally your thoughts as far as the looks. So don't fall for this. Oh, everybody's big. Oh, everybody's doing it. Oh, yeah, I should love myself no matter what. Think about your health. And I know this is hard because now we've seen all these very obese people in their teens, 20s, and 30s. Now they're obese, but they just think everybody's that way. So they don't even realize the health status that they're getting into with everything and just all the organ damage, everything that I've talked about in all my podcasts. So first, let's look at diabetes. Let's see how we've been hoodwinked over diabetes. We've known how to treat type 2 diabetes since the 1700s. We've been treating the type 2 diabetes by decreasing carbohydrates for centuries. But then something changed, and that's what we're going to talk about. So before 1997, as far as type 2 diabetes, there were only 2 different classes of anti-diabetic medications that were out. And of those 2 classes, that made up a total of 7 drugs. That's all there was. Okay. 2 classes of drugs, 2 classes. One class, the biguanides, that's metformin. That only has metformin. That's the one. But then the sulfonylureas, those have 6 more drugs. And anytime you have one class and have multiple drugs within that same class, we call those me toos. They do the exact same thing. They just basically call it a different name. So that's why you're going to see all these different drugs. Now, what happened? What happened in 1997? Up until 1997, our A1C, an A1C that was known to be good and fine, healthy, an A1C of 7 to 8. Okay, 7 to 8. An A1C of 8 is around 180 milligrams per deciliter of your glucose. And that's when your body knows your glucose levels are too high. So it starts spilling out through the kidneys. And that happens naturally around 100 milligrams per milliliter. Okay, so 7 to 8 was good. Now, what they've done is they've decided, back in 1997, they decided to figure out how they could decrease the A1C. So your A1C is a lab that you can test that tells how much your average blood glucose has been over the last kind of 3 to 4 months, more indicative of the last month, but an average of the 3 to 4. That's an A1C. When you test that, again, an A1C of 7 to 8 or an A1C of 8 was around 180 milligrams per deciliter. Now, when they've lowered this 5 to 6, they've lowered it. Instead of being better than or greater than 9 is a concern. That's when you have to start worrying about diabetes. Now they've lowered all the way down to 6.4. So it went from 9 is a worry all the way to now 6.4. Above 6.4, they say you have type 2 diabetes. Where'd this come from? First, I did a whole podcast on this back episode number 69. Why and when did we start using the term diabetes? But I will tell you right here, this is the Cliff Notes. The reason they lowered the A1C is because they figured by this, they can give people anti-diabetic medications. They can start them on diabetic medications earlier now. They don't have to wait till their A1C gets up to around 8. They can start at 6.4. Then it got even worse. Now they came up with this pre-diabetes, which means now between 5.7 and 6.4, you don't actually have diabetes yet, but you're working on getting diabetes. So we're going to go ahead and give you medication for this. Here's the deal. Diabetes is not a problem of having high blood glucose. That's not type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is a disease of insulin resistance. Insulin resistance comes from keeping your insulin levels too high for too long. And I'll explain why that is. Now, insulin resistance actually goes on for about 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 more years. You can have high insulin levels for a long time and your body still being able to keep your glucose at a normal range. So since we tell everybody look at their, or we don't, but since the drug companies tell everybody to look at their glucose levels and the medical system, look at your glucose levels. If your glucose levels are low, they think you're fine. That is not correct. As you go on and become more and more insulin resistant over years, over decades, you become more and more insulin resistant because you become insulin resistant over time because of how you feel your fat cells, because that's how insulin resistance happens. You're producing so much insulin that I'll go through the steps in just a little bit. I just want you to realize that it went from 5.7 to 6.4. So now we can give more people diabetic medications. Why is this important? This is important because when you look back in 1997, okay, remember at first we only had 2 classes and that encompassed 7 drugs. The reason why there were only 2 classes was because the drug company said that it was not worth their financial gain to try to make more diabetic medications because they didn't really see that decrease in blood glucose was really helping with overall cardiovascular disease in the first place. So they didn't want to spend all this money trying to get a glucose down when it wasn't making any difference. However, after 1997, after they came up with this pre-diabetes, now all of a sudden it went from 2 classes of drugs with 7 drugs total in those 2 classes to now there's 6 different classes of type 2 diabetic medications that encompass 31 different diabetic drugs. So now in 1997, we only had 7 drugs, 2 classes. After our pre-diabetes phase, now we have 6 classes and 31 different drugs. This is ludicrous. And what's going on is they're making you look at the A1C. They're making you look at your blood glucose. They're taking the eye off the ball because, and this is important. This is really important. Again, insulin resistance is due to keeping your insulin levels high for long periods of time. And we're talking day in, day out, keeping it high all throughout the day, every week, every month, every year, every decade. That's what causes insulin resistance. And I'll explain that in just a second. Now, think of this. Back in 1965, it was calculated that, or estimated that we only ate about 2 teaspoons of sugar per person per day back in 1965. 2015, it was re-estimated that now it's gone from 2 teaspoons of sugar per person per day up to 65 teaspoons of sugar per person per day. That is glucose toxicity. And we are poisoning our bodies with glucose day in and day out. This is huge. From 2 teaspoons up to 65, and you think, oh, there's no way. When you think one 12-ounce can of pop has 10 teaspoons of sugar, and then you think of all the cookies, crackers, flour, bread, pastas, all the stuff that's made out of nothing but glucose, that's what we eat all the time. Because the food companies said, well, because the sugar industries told the food companies to say that we need to be eating carbohydrates, and it's killing us. There was no science whatsoever done on this. The food pyramid is just nuts. The plate, the food pyramid, it's all marketing schemes. You've got to realize this. So here's what happens. You eat this glucose, remember 65 teaspoons per person per day it's up to, and I guarantee there's people who eat more than that. So what happens, you eat glucose, your glucose, it gets in your blood glucose goes up, that makes your body produce insulin. So now your insulin levels go up. When your insulin levels go up, it tells your liver, take all this excess glucose and turn that into triglycerides, turn that into fat, okay, so you can store it. And that's another thing. When it's talking about taking all this glucose, if you take all the blood out of your body, drain all the blood out of your body, and then test how much sugar, total sugar is in that blood, it comes about 2 teaspoons of sugar. That's all our body has. That's all our body needs. And we have very tiny stores. 10% of our liver is our glycogen, our glucose storage. That's it. We are not supposed to use carbohydrates, glucose as our energy source. It's not about calories. It's about the calorie source. It's not about how much energy you burn. It's, are you burning this energy off glucose that you just got done eating, or you burn that off the fat that you have stored in your fat cells that you want to burn off so you can lose weight, so you can get healthy. That's the difference. They want you focusing on the calories, and you should be focusing on the calorie source. And you do not want glucose as your calorie source unless you're in a fight or flight stress mode. That's when you're supposed to use the glucose. Otherwise, we're supposed to use the fat in our fat cells. And you can tell just by the storage. 10% of your liver for glucose versus 4,000 calories per pound of extra body fat that you have on board. Huge difference. We're supposed to use fat for our energy source, but they lied. So now I just sidetracked. I'm going back. So you eat all this glucose every single day, pretty much about every 2 hours. You're in this glucose. Your blood glucose goes high. Your pancreas produces insulin. Your insulin tells your body, turn all that excess glucose. And remember, anything over 2 teaspoons is excess glucose. So now it tells you to take all that excess glucose into triglycerides. Now it has to get that fat out of the liver, although some stays, and that's where you get fatty liver disease. That's one way you get fatty liver disease. But the rest of it gets packaged into what they call lipoproteins. If you go to the doctor and get your cholesterol panel, VLDLs, IDLs, LDLs, HDLs, they tell you that is cholesterol. That is not true. That is not cholesterol. Those are, I call them fat mobiles. These are just the little vehicles that your body uses. It produces them in the liver to circulate all this fat, all these triglycerides and cholesterol, because your liver makes cholesterol, extremely vital to our health. You have to have cholesterol. That's a lie also that we're being told is high LDLs cause heart attacks. But anyway, I'll get to that in the next section. But what you want to do is you eat the glucose, insulin goes up. Now you have to get these these triglycerides out of your liver and float around to your body. So it packages in a protein shell, and then it has triglycerides and cholesterol down in the middle of it. So they tell you, and that is a part of, that's a VLDL. That's a very low density lipoprotein. That's how it leaves the liver. It starts dropping off the cholesterol and the triglycerides all around the body where it needs to, and it shrinks to become an IDL, an intermediate density lipoprotein. Then it shrinks again to become an LDL, low density lipoprotein. Then what's supposed to happen is that goes back to the liver, gets more triglycerides and cholesterol put back in it, comes up to a VLDL, and it gets taken out again. That's how it works. HDLs are the same thing. Those are high density lipoproteins. And what that means is that this has a lot of cholesterol, not very much triglycerides at all. And HDLs are produced in the small intestine. The only reason I'm telling you this is because they tell you that LDL, high LDLs is what's causing heart attacks. Or cholesterol. They're saying LDL cholesterol is causing heart attacks. The cholesterol that's in a VLDL, IDL, LDL, and HDL is the exact same cholesterol. LDL is not cholesterol. HDL is not cholesterol. These are particles. These are fat mobiles. These are protein particles that transport this cholesterol and lipids or triglycerides all around your body. So the more glucose you eat, which is constant, the more LDLs your body has to make to try to transport that around your cells. Then it goes to the cell and it starts loading all those triglycerides into the cell. But when your insulin levels are high because you eat glucose, it forces your body to make triglycerides. Then the triglycerides through these LDLs, VLDLs, IDLs, and LDLs, the fat mobiles, that takes it to the fat cell. And then you start stuffing the fat in the fat cell. What happens, and remember, you have fat cells all over your body. So what happens is as a fat cell gets stuffed, you cannot put any more triglyceride in that because you're eating so much glucose. Your body tries to stuff as much in there. When the cell is stuffed, it says, I can't take any more fat. So it decreases the receptors for insulin because it says, I don't need insulin because I don't need triglycerides stuffed inside of me. So that cell is now insulin resistant. So now what your body does, it just goes to the next cell, tries to put it in that, and the next cell, and tries to put it in that. And as each of these cells gets stuffed to the max, that cell becomes insulin resistant. So that's why you becoming insulin resistant for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, depending on how your cells are, how many cells you have, and other things that are going on with your body, like the inflammation and liver disease and everything else that's caused by these high glucose levels. So that's what is happening. That's how insulin resistance comes. You've stuffed your fat cells so full, it can't do it anymore. So it becomes resistant to the insulin. And so the insulin has to go, or the glucose and triglycerides have to go to the next fat cell so you can start stuffing that with it. What the damage becomes when you have got insulin resistance over so many of your fat cells now, that now when you eat glucose, your insulin, it can't take it. It can't take it and put it in your fat cells anymore because they're all full. So now all this insulin, all this triglycerides, your body's going to have to take it and put it somewhere else. So it starts storing it around your visceral organs. And this is when you get the fatty liver, fatty pancreas, cardiovascular disease, hypertension, renal disease. Diabetes is the number one reason people go on dialysis. It goes to cancer, to Alzheimer's. Everything breaks loose when you start stuffing all this fat all around your visceral organs. So just like when you're talking about these medications, like these GLP-1 agonists and people who go on these fluid, water-only diets or whatever, all you're doing is starving your body. You're starving your body. You're not giving it the nutrients it needs. So it eats the fat out of your fat cells. That's great. That's what you're wanting. But it also eats the protein out of your muscles because you're not eating that either. And you're not getting the vitamins and you're not getting the minerals because you're just not eating. So your body starts eating itself from the inside, trying to take care of this. That's not how you lose weight. You lose weight by giving your body the nutrients it needs, protein, fat, vitamins, minerals, and water. When you give your body the nutrients it needs, it does not get hungry. So you're not hungry all the time because you're given the nutrients it needs and it knows what to do with. You are not poisoning it by giving these toxic levels of glucose all the time. And again, remember, this was known way back in the 1700s. That's how you cure type 2 diabetes, is just quit giving carbohydrates or decrease your amount quite a bit. But now that we have all these drugs on board, now we realize. So what happens is, and you have to remember that when they give you these medications, for diabetes, the way they work, even all 6 classes, one class doesn't, but all 6 classes either cause you to increase your insulin levels by either stimulating your pancreas to increase more insulin or to make your cells more sensitive to the insulin that's out there. There's only one class of drugs that actually works on the kidneys to allow you to excrete more glucose out of your blood into the kidneys. The only problem with that class of drugs is that it also causes a lot more urinary tract infections because of all that glucose going through the kidneys. But again, if you quit eating glucose, the only reason your glucose is going up is because you're eating it. That is the only 2 ways that your blood glucose goes up is you're either stressed. So your cortisol causes your liver to produce glucose out of the glycogen stores, breaks it down, puts glucose, or you're eating it. So now we have all these ways that you keep eating all the glucose you want, and we're going to give you drugs that make you pee it out or raise your insulin levels so we can push more of it in your fat cells. That is not the way you treat it. They're going to all these lengths to tell you not to tell you to just quit eating glucose. And glucose is the basic building block of all carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are plant-based. All plant-based foods have carbohydrates. They all have glucose, some a lot more than others. And all the man-made food, definitely. They put glucose and high fructose corn syrup in everything because they know that you're addicted to it. Now we know. So they give you these drugs that stimulate your insulin in a disease that's caused by too high insulin. And so now all this insulin is going and making more of that turning fat. That's why when you give insulin to people, they become more and more obese. That's why they say this is a chronic and progressive disease, because they're giving you medicine that's making it progressive. They won't tell you stop eating carbohydrates. How you can take care of this is with the LDLs is, again, the way the LDLs get increased is because you're eating all this glucose getting turned in, all these triglycerides, making all these fat mobiles go through. Now, they're telling you, and this will go in, this is the next thing. We're going to go on into cholesterol, because this is the other crazy thing. So you understand the glucose part. With the cholesterol, remember VLDLs, IDLs, LDLs, HDLs, they're all just fat mobiles. They're all just ways of moving fat around. It's got all the same cholesterol. Cholesterol is so vital to us. Every single cell in our body makes cholesterol. Every single cell except for red blood cells. And every cell that has a nucleus makes cholesterol. Our brain uses 20% of all the cholesterol that we make. It is vital. Our cells have two different ways of getting cholesterol into them. That's how vital it is. They make it, and if they can't make enough, they pull it from the outside. So when you look at LDLs, what they found is that you don't have to look at the LDLs, because let's say the LDLs are high. If the LDLs are high and triglycerides are high and HDLs, your good cholesterol, is low, then they see more heart attacks. But if your LDLs are high and triglycerides are low and HDLs are high, you don't see heart attacks. Same thing, if LDLs are low and triglycerides are high and your HDLs are low, you have more heart attacks. If your LDLs are low and your triglycerides are low and HDLs are high, you don't have heart attacks. So what this means is LDLs have nothing to do with heart attacks. It's your triglyceride level. You need your triglycerides as low as possible. Triglycerides come from eating carbohydrates because glucose gets turned into triglycerides. And you need to increase your HDLs. Your HDLs are the fat mobiles that are located in your intestines, and those increase mainly by eating fat, eating cholesterol, because they'll put it in the HDLs and make those, and then also resistance training, lifting heavy things. They've noticed that those two things together is what can increase your HDLs, and that would take of all this. So that's why they see people who are fat burners. If you're using your fat for your energy source, or you're moving fat up and down all around your body all the time, your LDL levels are going to be elevated, because you're trafficking all this LDL, all these triglycerides and cholesterol to all the parts of the body you need, because you're using all these triglycerides for all the multiple functions that fat has, plus energy. If you are a glucose burner for your energy source, like they've made everybody right now, if you have high LDLs, you're using glucose for your energy source, so you shouldn't be moving them around. Your LDLs are high because you're making so much more, because you're eating so much glucose. So it doesn't matter about your high LDL. It matters why that high LDL get there. If you're a fat burner, it's good. If you're a carb burner, it is not good. And I talked about all this. And again, that's why. And what do statins do? Statins kill your cells. The way statins work is they block your body. And if you go back and listen to the podcast I did before this, and this will explain all to you about all the adverse effects that all these medications have. It's crazy. But basically what statins do is they gum up the system that your cell has of living, being able to grow, being able to keep itself healthy, be able to signal other cells, everything that your cell needs to thrive, to grow, and to be able to replicate. These statins come in and they gum that up so it doesn't work. And so basically you start killing your cells. And that's what they do. They say, oh my gosh, I need cholesterol to live. And it's not getting them because you have this statin on board. So it puts more receptors on the outside of its cells, so it can bring more LDLs in, because it's dying. It's saying, I got to get cholesterol. The statin is made where I can't make my own now, so I've got to get from the outside. So that's why your blood cholesterol goes down, because it's your cell's last ditch effort to live before it dies. And there are so many adverse effects with all of these. It's crazy. Now, the latest one that's come out. Okay. The latest one that's come out is this whole thing about using Tylenol and the shots. Just so you know, okay, Tylenol is one of the safest drugs on the market. And this kind, again, I've been a doctor of pharmacy for 35 years. And I can tell you, and if you've listened to my past podcasts on adverse effects, these medications, all medications come out, they have easily 30 to 40 different adverse effects. And some of them are over 70, like with the statins and with these GLP-1 agonists, there's over 70 different adverse effects associated with these. And these are straight from the drug book, lexicon drug book that we use to dose patients to learn anything about medications, and it also lists all the adverse effects that the drug company reports. Okay. So GLP-1s, they have over 70. Statins have over 70. And most drugs have 30, 40 different adverse effects. Just tell me an drug and I can show you. However, Tylenol, oral Tylenol, only has about 4 adverse effects. Only 4. Not 30, 40, 70, 80 adverse effects like these other medications. It only has 4. It's been around forever. Now they're trying to tell everybody that's what's causing people to go on the spectrum isn't these shots that these children get from the time they're born until they go to college. They're saying it's because they're taking Tylenol with it. Okay. There's a couple things I'm going to go in real quick. This is kind of biochemistry, but it's not. I just want to explain to you. They're saying that the reason Tylenol is causing this is because Tylenol drains your body of glutathione, your liver of glutathione. So now it can't get rid of some of the bad things that are in these shots. Okay. Listen, that's not how Tylenol works. Tylenol, there is a limit. Your liver is just like everything. Our liver and our kidneys is what's getting rid of all of these chemicals that our body's putting in it. Our livers and our kidneys are trying to detoxify our bodies. So what happens when you take Tylenol? When you first, just a normal dose of Tylenol, a normal dose, regular dose of Tylenol, when it goes to the liver, your liver will attach a sulfur group on it. It's called sulfation. And that makes it more water soluble, and then you can excrete it through the kidneys. Now, depending on how old you are, some of us use sulfation and some of us use glucuronide. They attach glucuronide to Tylenol. That makes it more water soluble and you excrete it out. So after you go through all your sulfur stores in your liver for sulfation to make it more water soluble, then you go through all your glucuronide stores in the liver to make it more water soluble. You don't worry about these words. But after that, then your body switches over to a different way. It just doesn't add a sulfur or glucuronide group to make it water soluble. It goes through a system in the liver called the cytochrome P450 system. Don't worry about it. But when that goes through the cytochrome P450 system, the metabolite that is made out of Tylenol, out of acetaminophen, is toxic to your liver. So that's when your liver produces glutathione to attach to that toxic metabolite to get rid of it. So in an overdose situation, you can overwhelm your liver and deplete your glutathione. And then you have issues. However, and that's where the liver damage, that's when all this liver issues come in. However, they know that you do not overwhelm your liver. They've known for a long time until you take more than 1,000 milligrams in one dose. That's 2 extra strength Tylenol. And it was this way for a long time. In one dose, you can't have more than 2 extra strength Tylenol, which is 1,000 milligrams. And you cannot do that more than 4 times a day. So 4,000 milligrams a day. However, that's been changed because, and there's a good reason for it, because they put Tylenol in everything. All these over-the-counter products, no matter what it is, it could be sleep aids, pain aids, anything. They put Tylenol in almost everything. And so people don't realize that Tylenol is acetaminophen. And so they take all these different products and they can overdose themselves with a Tylenol. So now they've taken the range down to only 3,000 milligrams a day. And preferably for one dose, keep it under 650. So now you should only have no more than 2 regular strength Tylenol. That'd be 650 milligrams and no more than 4 times a day. Again, you're going to stay under that 3,000 milligrams. So these people who are doing these Tylenol challenges and taking more than 1,000 milligrams in one dose, yes, you are not proving anything except for that you're going to kill your liver because that's too much for your liver to handle. It is not true that if a little does a little good, a lot does a lot of good. That it couldn't be more wrong. Your body is trying to do everything it can to get rid of these toxins. And the more you eat, the more you tax your body. Okay, so that's not what's going on. And again, why are we being misguided? Why is it that they're trying to blame Tylenol for the adverse effects of these shots? And you ask anybody who has a child that has one of these adverse effects, they'll tell you it was a shot. From 1950 to 2018, all the shots a child got from the time they were born till they went to college, add all of them up together, it came to 18 shots. Now, what happened from 2018 to present, it is now from the time a child is born until they go to college, it is recommended by the CDC that they get almost 55 to 70 individual shots before they go to college. Okay. 1950 to 2018, there was only 18 shots. From 2018 to present, it's up to 55 to 70 shots that they're recommending. And this is why we're seeing so many issues right now. This is not because of Tylenol. This is because now, if you have an adverse reaction to a shot, it is illegal to sue the drug company. You can't sue them if you have a reaction to a shot. So if I give you a shot and say it's going to take care of something and you don't get that something, I can tell you my shot worked. If I give you my shot and tell you it's going to keep you from getting this and you do get it, I just say, oh, that must have been a mutation. That's why it didn't work. And if I give you the shot and you die from it, you can't sue me. Or any of the other adverse effects like become on the spectrum. You can't sue me. So from a business point of view, wouldn't it only make sense to put out as much of these shots as you possibly can? Because it doesn't matter whether it works or whether it doesn't. And you can't get sued if it does hurt somebody. So that's why we've gone from 18 shots to almost 70 shots in our children from the time they're born till they go to college. We're being hoodwinked. Okay. They're making us look at our glucose levels to treat diabetes when you can get an insulin level. I think my wife just got her insulin level on her own. We didn't need a physician to do this. And I think it cost $15 was all it was. Insulin is what we should be testing. And if you start testing insulin early, you're going to see that you've been becoming insulin resistant for a long time. If you wait till your blood glucose is too high, you're way late in the game. You can still reverse it, but you're way late in the game. You're already starting to get fat all around your visceral organs. So what do? Drug companies tell you to look at glucose. Take your eye off the insulin that's really causing it. And this causes more and more people to be on diabetic drugs. Statins, have everybody look at LDL. Tell everybody that LDL is cholesterol and cholesterol is bad. Why? Because you're getting fat and cholesterol from animal products. And that forces you away from that and onto the man-made products. That's why they are telling you all this. They want you to eat their products so they can gain all this money. So they tell you, look at LDL cholesterol instead of telling you, look at your triglycerides and your HDLs. If you looked at your triglycerides and got those down, looked at HDLs, got those up, you're not going to have any issues whatsoever. You're not supposed to look at your LDLs, but that's all they do. Every physician out there wants to put you on a statin. Oh my gosh. Even if you don't have a high LDL, everybody should be on a statin. They are so blinded by what these drug companies are telling them. And now they're having us do it again. Take your eye off the shot and put it on to one of the safest drugs that are out there on the market, as long as you dose it appropriately. Keep your levels low. If you're adult, stick under 650 milligrams per dose and don't do that more than 4 times a day and you'll be fine. So I know that took a lot of time. And just so you know, one little last thing, as far as drugs coming to the market, before the mid 1960s, there was only an average of about 16 new drugs every year come to market. Okay. Before the 1960s. Now, up to 2018, now we put an average of 59 new drugs per year into the market. So we went from 16 in the 60s up to 59 drugs per year coming out into the market. And they all have multiple adverse effects, and they don't really know all the adverse effects until they put them out into public and everybody starts reporting these. So from 2015 to 2024, there's been an average of 47 new drugs every single year coming to market. Back in the 1960s, they would spend about 70 to 80% of their revenue on new drugs coming to market. Now, the drug companies spend 70 to 80% of their revenue on marketing. It's all marketing. Just like I said, as far as these statins, okay? These statins, there are so many different statins and they have so many adverse effects that are out there right now, and they're killing people. And we continue to tell people that this is what they need to do. Marketing is what the drug companies are looking for. They do not care about your health. It is not about your health. Or they would tell you, quit eating carbohydrates. Don't go by this food pyramid, which was horrible. Don't look at your LDLs. Look at your triglycerides and your HDL. And don't be scared of the safest drug that's on the market as long as you dose it appropriately. If you know anybody who'd be interested in this, please pass it along to them. So thank you very much for listening. And I want you to have a fantastic week. And as always, make simple, healthy choices to live a quality life.